Railroading is such a dirty word in D&D. Why?
Maybe if you do it wrong, let's discuss how to railroad your D&D players properly.
I'm Nerdarchus Ted.
And I'm Nerdarchus Dave. Welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds.
Time to hop aboard this one-way train.
All right, let's start off with what is railroading?
So railroading is a metaphorical term that describes a game master style in which player characters are forced by lack of options or through narrative to accept seemingly by fiat actions that affect the character.
So in a role-playing game, I find players are very unhappy when they don't feel like they have many choices. And that's where railroading gets a bad rap.
Absolutely. And, we've had many discussions about railroading over the course of our, long gaming career. And, when you take away that choice, it feels like, you're like removing a limb from the players, like, not just their characters. They feel attacked when they can't make those decisions.
Yeah, so you have to work in these things into the narrative in a way that makes the players feel like they have choices, they have options, their options matter.
So in other words, you have to describe it appropriately.
You do have to describe it appropriate, Ted. That was terrible. Folks, the reason why that's so terrible is we're going to tell you about something that's not terrible, and that is Describe, right? Describe is finely crafted box text, right? It is a company that is sponsoring this video, and they have these collections of places, monster spells, with other places that are coming, characters, items, and cartography. There is no mechanics involved. What they do is they have box text at your disposal for you, the player, or the dungeon master. You're casting a spell. You can probably go over there, or not probably, you can go over there and go, I need this spell. What is some flavor text for it? And they will give it to you. If they don't already have it, you can actually request scenes and they will make it for you. So this is pretty cool. We're happy to partner with them. There's a special link down below that gives us credit when you go over there so that they know that we sent you. But also, if you use the promo code NERDARCHY, you're going to get $7 off. And this is going to help you be more descriptive and describe things in your game, whether you're the player or the dungeon master.
All right, so let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly about railroading a campaign. So let's do it in order. The good. You can have scripted adventures, easily planned homebrew, and easy to follow adventures.
So the bad getting in there is going to be no wiggle room for the characters, motivated story, and no choice in where the story goes.
And of course,
from the player's standpoint.
And of course, the ugly. Disconnection from the world if nothing is going to pertain to the PCs. No uniqueness to any other game running said material. And nothing generated specifically for the player or player characters.
Yeah, and some of those things I feel like it kind of like points to maybe more like pre-written adventures and stuff like that, where it kind of feels the sameness. But it really doesn't have to be this way. Even if you are the DM and you want to tell a very linear type of story with your players, as opposed to something that's more sandboxy or non-linear, there are definitely ways to do it. But I'm sure we all have our horror stories about being railroaded, and that's why it's such a dirty word, right? Let us know and share with the Nerdarchy community down below in the comments your terrible railroad stories.
And once you've done unloading all of this, disembark and do all the things that make the YouTube happy. Like, share, subscribe, even ring that notification bell.
And as a quick reminder, we drop new Nerdarchy videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so come on back to the channel.
So, all right, we look at these, all of the bad and all of the ugly. But there's some good that goes along with it. So why does railroading get such a bad rap?
Because the players want, we've kind of said this already, the players want to feel like they're making choices and their choices matter. So also, there's a way that GMs will railroad their players where they like trick them into not having a choice, which really makes it worse. And I want to really get into and dive into how to get around that and make it more palatable for the players. But like that's the worst thing you can do as the GM is trying to trick them into doing the things that you want them to do, and them feeling like they never had a real choice in the matter.
All right, so how can we railroad in a good way and leave all that negativity behind?
First of all, when you are going to have something happen to the players, just do it. Don't trick them into trying to make, or don't try to trick them into trying to make the decisions that you want them to make. Instead, if you want them to be on a boat in the beginning of your campaign, let them know this is how the campaign starts. They are just on the boat. There's no hoops to jump through. There's no you trying to convince them to get on the boat. No, they're just on the boat.
We've used, quite a lot of different styles over the years. And like there are times where like I look back on, my DM moments where I've done this kind of stuff, with shame where I felt like I've had to trick the players or tell them no straight up, this is where the adventure's going. I need you to do X. But because there were those, I'm giving you choice, I'm giving you agency, players felt like, oh, well, I can do this. And if you do, oh, well, sorry, you're out of the adventure. Sorry, toodaloo. So it can be very problematic. But, every time you sit behind a GM screen, every time you play a role playing game, you've got the capabilities to learn and grow as a player and as a GM.
Just remember, every day there's things happening to people that they wouldn't have chosen to happen to them, right? They are the victim of circumstance. So if you want to railroad your players in a way that is going to receive less friction, you have to do it in that way. You have to have circumstances happen where it was beyond their control, because that's just normal. That's just life. It'll happen in a role playing game, and it happens in real life, And then from there, that's when you have to open it up and let go, and they do whatever they want to do. Like me and Doug were talking, and a lot of his adventures start on a boat going to the place where the adventures are going to happen. And it's very sandboxy once they get off the boat. But before that, it is not. This is how the adventure starts. We start on the boat. It gives the players a chance to interact with each other, the role play, they explore the boat, explore the NPCs, get to know the NPCs, and do these things, but they're in this confined space. And, aside from jumping overboard, which is a role playing game, you could technically do that and you may drown, but it is an option. But, aside from that, that's where the game started. And I find players are going to be okay if you're like, oh, this is kind of the concept for the game, and you tell them up front. But if you like try and trick them into getting on the boat or persuade them to get on the boat, you're going to make your life so much more difficult as the dungeon master, and also for the players as well. It's so much easier for a lot of this stuff if you just tell them what you want, what you want from them, and then they can like agree or not agree, depending on whether they want to be in your game or not, right? But it's so much better than just trying to force them or trick them.
If you look at, the concept as from a dungeon master perspective, I'm going to tell my players, we are starting on a boat. Well, that means as a player character, I should not come to the table with hydrophobia and I'm afraid of boats and the water and what have you, because my character concept's not going to work with the way the campaign is going to start. When you look at some of the aspects of, the characters in Critical Role, the second campaign, there's a character who has that, and that has to be confronted before they can get on the boat. So if you're going to start the campaign and you're going to instantly go to a player's, our player character's fears, that can slow everything down because now we're, tailoring everything to this one particular character. So it is very important to talk and communicate with your players, with your, with your dungeon master as to where everything is going to go, so that you can get into the narration. You can get into what the story is to start.
Yeah, a good example of this would be an example of it being done poorly, right? Was like Ted had this great idea for a campaign, and he wanted to run this pre-made campaign called Ghost Walk, and the idea is you're dead. The characters die, and that's when the adventure starts. But he's like, your idea was like, how much cooler would it be if I kill them and then have it start that way? Your players are not going to appreciate that. Now,
Yeah.
if instead you go to your players and go, hey, we're going to do this campaign, but it starts when you die. I'm going to need you guys to tell me how your character died, right? Then they're on board because you gave them agency, you gave them choice. So that makes the players happy, and you're happy because as the dungeon master, you get to run the game you wanted to run. I've done something similar. I've ran a one-shot adventure I call Valhalla Awaits, and the premise is you're a group of warriors that you want to get into Valhalla, but you're on the edge as to whether they're going to let you in or not. So you have to go through some final tasks or trials. And, so it starts off with the players describing how they died in battle. And if they want to, they can also tell me and the other players, what's keeping them out of Valhalla. And then we start the adventure.
Yeah, I love this, and at some point in time, I wanna get in on the Valhalla Awaits game, because it's a blast. I absolutely hate sharing the Ghost Walk story because it's so embarrassing that like every aspect of how I railroaded that was just bad. But as I said earlier, every time you play, you've got those those learning moments. So what can we do to improve? And I look at these things of when you give the players and their characters agency with it, as Dave brought up. I ran my second full length campaign in 5e. I everybody decided we were going to do a 12 session story arc, which was definitely outside the realm of something that I had done previously. Most of my games were very open ended, and the last one that I ran for like over 4 years from the course of levels 1 to 20. So to be confined to, I only have 12 sessions. Basically 36 hours of game time to tell an entire story. I was seriously flummoxed. But we all sat down and we did our session 0, and the players got to create how they interacted with each other, what their backstories were, how they linked, who the villain was. And I took everything from there. So everyone was already connected, already vested in this villain. And then because it was a 12 session arc, I had that villain make an appearance at 4, 8, and then at 12 to, kind of end, this story. And from my perspective, I didn't feel that there was choice. I felt that it was like a very heavy, here is a railroaded campaign. But every time I've talked about it, Dave is like, no, everything that happened was all based off of the choices that we made as characters. We wanted this dude dead, so we were going to keep hunting him down.
Yeah, so the best way to railroad your players is get them to railroad themselves into your adventure, right? And that's going to go a long way. And when you have an outcome that you seek as the dungeon master, the easiest way to get there is to also want the players to want the same thing, right? And that's that can be the tricky part in figuring that out. But in that campaign, it worked out perfectly. Session 0 really set the tone, and from there on out, we were able to play the story arc that Ted had planned because we had already been bought into it in session 0.
So when you look at these kinds of things, that player buy-in is super critical. The storylines that you want to tell, they need to connect. If you have the slightest bit of hesitation, from the players, they're not all in. And when they're not all in, that is when they're going to buck. That's when there's going to be, an issue with the rails.
That's when the train's going to derail, Ted? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
That's when the train is going to derail. They're going to want to get off. They're going to want to go in another direction, or they're going to buck against you as the DM because they don't want to go to the story that you're trying to tell. So you have to look at all of these things. You have to, You have to get everyone on board.
Well, Ted, I think we gave some pretty good DM advice today, but hey, if you want some things to avoid, check out Worst Ways to DM. It's around here somewhere. Click.
And if you want to help us keep making videos like this, you want to stay on board, why not, ride that train over to Patreon and support us over there.
So thank you. You receive monthly 5e content for players and DMs alike, a chance to game with us, and more.
So until next time, stay nerdy.